We're live. Good evening. I was testing to see if we were live, and we're live. A way of announcements, the ones that I have is Miss Betty has gone from the hospital to, let me see what the name of this place is, Bridgewater Rehab. Bridgewater is way out 200 in front of, on top of the world. There's two of them out there. If you get to the wrong one, they'll send you to the other one. But that's where it's at, so it's way out there on off of 200. Hoping she'll get better and go home. She's had a rough go of it. About a year and a half. And Colin's struggling without her, so keep them in your prayers. Also, we're packing bags tonight for the homeless in the middle school room right over here, right after church. If you're able to do that to help Mr. Sapp. Anything else? Jody and I visited with Nate yesterday. Nate's doing better, but it's still a big struggle. He goes to the doctor probably every day. He goes and gets a treatment, and then he has to go get a shot the next day to offset that treatment, and water buildup still in his system. He takes water pills. He's not going to the hospital as often though to have water removed, but you could still see it in him. His legs have gotten better. We could see that, but you could still tell he's still got some water inside. So keep him in your prayers. Anyone else? Nobody? Guy, would you lead a prayer, please? Amen. All right, tonight we're going to look at stewardship in the working area. Now, if you were to think about, okay, what do I owe to work as far as being a steward, as in growing or giving back, where would you go in the Bible, or what would you think this passage would be that you would not think about? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Anyone else? We're heading right where Richard started. Anybody know where that's found in the Bible? Give me an area. Give me a book. Ephesians 6. Of course, Jody would give it to us. Ephesians 6 starts out talking about children and parents, right? And then if you go down towards the bottom of it, what do you talk about in Ephesians 6? Armor of God, okay? But if you look right in the middle, it's nested right in there, just exactly what Richard was talking about. I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. I'm going to start with verse 5 in Ephesians 6 chapter. It says, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. As slaves of Christ, do the will of God with all your heart. Work with enthusiasm, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will reward each one of us for the good we do, whether we are slaves or free. Masters, treat your slaves in the same way. Don't threaten them. Remember, you have a master in heaven, and he has no favorites." I want to look at the employees to the employer first, because that's what it talks about the most. So, what are some of the negative things that we hear or we say about work or at work to other people? Negative things. Come on, y'all hear them just like I do. I don't get paid enough. I work too many hours. It's not fair. It's just a job. That's first on my list. It's just a job. Somebody else. Drew, did you have your hand up? Nothing. Yeah. I don't know why I'm there. Oh, I forgot. Thursday's payday. Even though I don't like what I get paid, I love to see Thursday come around. Here's what I wrote down. It's just another job. It's just a job. I do just enough to get by. I do what the others do. You hear that sometimes. My productivity is more than I'm paid. We hit most of those as we went through there. You know what I read when I read Ephesians 5th chapter through what was it, 8th verse? Yeah, 8th verse. I read in there, no, it's not just another job. It's not. That's for the guy that's standing right by you, or the guy that got you started complaining. Okay? That's him. That's his lot in life. Because you are not just another employee. What kind of employee are you? From our reading, you are from the employment agency of Christ or God, because Christ is God. That's what it says. You are from His employment. You are working for Christ. Remember, this is me. It's not somebody else. It's not some other person. It's not most of the employees. It's Jed, or it's John, or it's Edwin. And we have a higher calling than that other person sitting right side of us complaining. A believer and a follower of Jesus Christ, and you cannot Be the normal. What does the Bible, the King James Version uses a word. What does the Bible say that we are? What kind of people are we? We're holy people. It does say that. I was looking for another word, though. Peculiar. Peculiar means what? Strange, different, not the same. We are not the normal person, okay? We're not the normal person. So, how are we to work? I'm going to break it down verse for 5, 6, and 7. You had a comment? It's a, that's the key words right there. It's a different perspective. I don't work for um, I don't work for FedEx. I don't work for myself. I don't work for Marion County School Board. I work for Christ or for God. Um, Verse number 5 there says, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. What does that word fear mean? This is something we do for God, right? It's all through, especially the Old Testament, fear God, keep his commandments. So what does he mean here when it says that we should obey our earthly masters with deep respect and fear? And as Richard pointed out, we're looking at employer to employee. So it would be treat your employer with deep respect and fear. What does it mean? Yeah, respect. Uh, Let me reread that verse with the back side of the verse. Obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. If Christ were your boss, would it be different? Would I complain about the pay? Probably. I think that if it was Christ and we had that same attitude, that it would be. But I think that's what we're trying to look at is what attitude do we come to the table with? Do I come to the table with the attitude that I'm working for this person? Do I come to the table with the attitude that I'm going to complain, gripe, groan, and moan? Or am I going to look at myself as different and serving a higher power than the one that's right over me? So, anything else on verse 5? Yes, sir. We're coming. And that's coming in a few minutes. Yes, sir. I think it was the first lesson that we had when we looked at Genesis and we read, maybe it was last week, but at some point we looked at Genesis and we've seen how that we are all made. And I asked a question: what is our bodies made for? Glorify God. That's what they're made for. So how are we good stewards of that? It's got to be. It's got to show in our work. It's got to show in our work. Things we do, things we say. Yes. All right, look at verse 6. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. I worked for Coca-Cola for 10 years. 5 of those years I was in supervision. And one of the things that I could never really understand is that when somebody was coming to inspect my territory or our territory, the terminal's territory, they would tell us where they're going. So guess what? We would go out in front of them and we would make sure everything looked just like it was supposed to. Now, if you entered into a supermarket, you got so many spaces on the shelf. It's supposed to be Coca-Cola, classic as they call it now, Diet Coke, and this goes on. Well, they got about 8 or 10 flavors back then. They've got way more than that now, but it's always changing because it goes by number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seller. Okay. I remember one time it was a district was coming down. We had to go to Jacksonville. They sent 2 of us from Gainesville up to Jacksonville, and they sent other supervisors up there too. We would go to like a Publix and we pulled out everything they had, and we put fresh stuff in there. There was no bad stuff in there at all, and everything on the shelf was perfect. Okay, they're coming tomorrow. All right. That day, we could not be in our uniform. We had to be in street clothes. We went and we faced everything. We made sure all the shelves were full. And as we were walking out, guess what? Sometimes we passed them coming in. It just makes no sense. If you want to test somebody, catch them when they're not, don't think you're looking. And that's what it's telling us here. Try to please them all the time. All the time. As slaves of Christ. And the last part of that says, with all your heart. Do we put all that we have into our job? I don't know as I do sometimes. Yeah. Verse 7 tells us to work with enthusiasm, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Work with enthusiasm. What does it mean to work with enthusiasm? With joy. Woohoo! I get to go to work in the morning. Yeah. Um, hey, I'm right there with y'all. I hate to get up and go to work some mornings too. I've got a bad meeting in the morning I've got to go to, I might take a licking in the morning, but I'm going to go do it anyway. But I'm not going to do it with joy like it's talking about here. But I will do it with enthusiasm uh, to some degree. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Be happy we can work. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. My wife is going to retire, Deanna. She's going to retire from the school system next year, she says. I'll believe it when I see it. They're going to need to go hire 7 more people to take her place. I'm telling you. She gets paid for an average of 40 hours. She's on salary, but I guarantee you she puts in somewhere around 100 a week. When she was on spring break last week, I seen her on her computer. That's the way she is. I say something to her and she just snickers at me. But it's that, that's the Christian attitude. That's what. See, I've heard that out of Pat Lockhart. I've heard that out of Betty Williamson when they were working for the school system in Lake Weir. Yep, yep. So yeah, yep, yep. Hmm. Yeah. I, the question that we have to ask ourselves is who do we work for? It was years and years and years and years ago when somebody asked me how come I did everything like I was supposed to. I mean, my paperwork would be right, it would turn in, I wouldn't miss anything. And he asked me why. And I said, because I work for somebody above this place. And he says, oh, your wife won't let you. I said, no, 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 no. I said, no, no. I said, I got to work for somebody above her. so, so Who do we work for? I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Do you work for a mean, overbearing boss? Sometimes we do, don't we? Uh, just can't do the job. You know, what we're talking about here in this reading is slaves to masters. So we have one advantage over slaves to masters. What can we do? We can leave. But how do we leave? We throw it down and walk off? Or do we come to John and say, John, I can't do this job. I'm giving you my 2-week notice or a month notice or whatever it is. Um, it's kind of a lost art in today's world um, that you give a notice, but I believe that's what we would need to do. The slaves have no choice, though. So I want us to put ourselves in the slave's position. Now what do we do when we have an overbearing boss? One that beats us, one that mistreats us, one that doesn't pay us good. He gave him a chicken because he did something, but I got a piece of bacon. I'm just saying. Remember what it said up earlier, as unto the Lord. That's what we work for. Matthew, we're going to get to yours. Matthew, the 20th chapter, first 12 verses. Matthew 20. I'm reading from the NLT again. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire late workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay the normal daily wage and sent them out to the field. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he was passing through the marketplace and saw some people standing around doing nothing. So he hired them, telling them he would pay them whatever was right. At the end of the day, so they went to work in his vineyard. At noon and again at 3 o'clock, he did the same thing again. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he went into town again and saw people standing around. He asked them, "Why haven't you been working today?" They replied, "No one's hired us." The landowner says, "Then go and join my other workers in the vineyard." That evening he told his foreman to call the workers and to pay them, beginning with the last workers first. When those who were hired at 5 o'clock were paid, each received a full day's wage. When those that were hired first came to get their pay, they assumed they were going to receive more, but they too received a day's wage. When they received their pay, they protested to the owner. "Those people worked only 1 hour, and yet you've paid them just as much as you have paid us for working all day in the scorching sun." So if you look at the King James Version says that he paid them all the same. And this here at the end of it doesn't say it up at the beginning. But what's the thing that we see here? It's not fair. Life's not fair. Some versions use the dollar amount. King James Version does, I think. Probably New King James. This is NLT. It does not use it, but some of them do. But for sure, they got paid the same exact amount, and it's not fair. It's not fair. So, Jed, I hire you to do a job for me, and I'm going to give you $100 for that job. At the end of that job, let's say that, okay, that job entailed more than you thought it would. Say I'm getting a bargain. What should you expect to be paid at the end? $100. $100. Huh? I still didn't hear you. Changed order. Okay. If I gave him $50 up front and he got there started and seen it was going to be more, he could walk off, keep the $50. Okay. No, I want to ask us, do we ever find ourselves in this similar situation? All the time. All the time. It doesn't. If you if you think to the story of Jonah, it's just 4 chapters. But if you go read that story, when Jonah finally, the people knew to finally repent, what was it that Jonah said? Told you that's what was going to happen. I told you. So let me ask you, and then Jonah goes and he builds this little hut, and he gets up under it, and then the scorching sun, and God asked him, he says, "Do you have a reason to be mad?" He said, "Yeah." Okay, so let me ask you a question. I'm gonna put some metaphors in it that people use. Okay, we're sitting at St. Peter's Golden Gates, and we're ready to go into the into the pearly city. The gates are already open because it says they don't close anyway. Uh, but you're standing there, and there's a line for the saved, and there's a line for those that are not going to be saved. And you look around in that line, and you look back at somebody that was a terrible person all his life, and you know that just before you died, he was still a terrible person, but yet he's in the saved line. What do you want to think? We ought to thank God, or are we going to be like Jonah and go pout somewhere? This is that story, and you relate it to the spiritual side of it. So let's put it back to work. Um, Somebody works more than you do. Who do you work for? I can't gauge myself to what somebody else does. I have to gauge myself to what's right to God. What's right to God. Um, Complaining, arguing, protesting. We get caught up in those things. There's a guy at work. Well, he's not there anymore, but he used to another contractor. He would come around and in the mornings, and I would be walking from here to there, and he would just be walking with me, complaining the whole way, complain. And here I am trying to get away from him so I could get away from all the negativity, because I know that if it gets in my ears, what's going to start happening? I'm going to stop and start talking to him, and we're going to get in a good conversation about how we're mistreated. And it never does me any good. It never does any of us any good. Who do I work for? I work for Christ. Is it fair to think that we've done everything we're supposed to since we were the age of 16 all the way to the age of 90? And then this other person's been this bad person, done whatever he wanted to all of his life, and then in his later years became a Christian. But that's what it says here. So we got to think about the same thing about working, because it's a parallel story. And that's what we have to do at work too sometimes. Yeah, it don't mean that I need to cheat to get ahead. Okay. There's a judge, and it's not our call. It's not our call. Some other passages, and I think one or two of them may have already been mentioned. Colossians, the 3rd chapter, yes. Yeah, yeah, if I make $1 million a year or $5 million a year coaching a football team or whatever it is that I do, how much do I get paid when I die? Oh, oh, there it is. Who do I work for? It's just monetary things here on this earth. God puts money where he wants to, puts cattle where he wants to, puts gold where he wants to. Okay? He just moves it around. He gives me the opportunity to give. He gives me the opportunity to work. He gives me the opportunity to give back. Now, what I do with what God has blessed me with. So, we have some great workers in this congregation, I'm going to tell you. I don't see him here tonight. Brother Earl, in his 90s. I guarantee you, if you called him and asked him to do a job for you, he would be there in the morning. Mr. Loris would be fussing at you the next day, but he'd be there in the morning. Denny Hoare, I don't see him here tonight either. He'd be the same way. You call him and say, "Hey, Denny," all right? And there's others. There's others that it doesn't matter what it is, and it's not for pay. It's not for pay. Remember, it's not our call. Not our call sometimes. Amen. But what I deserve is not what I want. All right, remember who we work for. Colossians 3rd chapter, 17th verse. No, the 3rd verse. Colossians 3:17. 3:17 says, "Whatsoever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord God, Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him." Matthew 6:33, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." Well, so what's the righteousness that we're talking about tonight that we need to seek? Do a good job. Um, to be recognized from God as doing a good job, doing my best. Now, I may not can do what Jed can do. If I had a baseball team, Jed probably win. If we could just go pick them out from the whole wide world, because he'd go get his dad. That's not going to be the way. James, the 1st chapter, 25th verse. "But whosoever looketh in perfect law of liberty and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deeds." Now we're going to look at some other things as we look through this quarter at stewardship. But you could take this verse and put it to the working side and say, how am I working for God? Okay? There's secular work and there's work that we do for God. The two should be really mingled up, in my opinion. But how much do we give to God as far as work goes? We can think about that for a little bit on in the back of our heads. Colossians 3:22, "Slaves, in all things obey them who are your masters on earth, not with external service as those who merely please men, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord." Kind of the same verse, isn't it? Verse 23 says, whatsoever you do, do your work heartily, as for the Lord rather than for men. 24, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is Christ, Lord Christ, whom you serve. My employment's to God. My employment's to God. Luke the 10th chapter, 2nd verse. Therefore said he unto them, the harvest is truly great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of harvest that he would send forth laborers into his harvest. Anybody remember what Luke 10 is talking about here? Fields are white, he says. It's where he's talked to the lady at the well, the Samaritan at the well. And when his disciples come back, they have their conversation, but she goes into town, she gathers everybody up and comes back. And this is what Jesus says. Truly the harvest is great. Laborers are few. So what is he trying to tell us here about work? About work. Who do we work for? Why do we work? Maybe to show others the way to Christ? Now, I took 42 minutes to do this one, so that leaves me 3 minutes to talk about employers. But I want you to notice that he only gave one verse to employers. It says, masters, treat your slaves in the same way. So everything that we talked about, you got to turn it around for yourself. Don't threaten them, it says in verse 9. Remember, you have the same master in heaven, and he has no favorites, this version says. He has no favorites. Do unto others. It doesn't say do unto those that are like, parallel to you, does it? No. Yes. I've got to answer for the way I treat people that are under me. I'll have to answer for that one day. If I've cheated them, if I've been mean to them, if I've not treated them fairly. No. We all work for somebody. We all work for somebody. Because who do we work for? We work for God. We work for God. We work for Christ. Let your light so shine. I love that song. This little Christian light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. I love the verse when it gets to all around the neighborhood. I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine. All day long, let it shine. I think that those who lead, as we're talking about employers, I think those that lead have to have more to answer to God than those who work or follow. I think the scriptures teach us that. It says it tells us not everybody want to be teachers, okay, or not everybody will be teachers, and it gives us a lot of different things there to think about. But the thing we have to remember is we serve the same master, and he has no favorites, none. 1 Corinthians 12th chapter talks about what? Talks about the body in comparison as to the Christian church, okay? And it asks a question: what if all were eyes, or what if all were ears, or what if all were feet? So what if everybody was a boss? Who would there be? Who would it be? Sometimes we have a boss that we need to go by, just like William said. Not everybody can be in the kitchen. Not everybody can cook either. Somebody got to sweep the floor. Somebody got to clean the bathroom. So just because my job is not the best job in the world, how should I treat it? Mm, 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 mm. Anybody got any closing comments, thoughts? Hey, thank you for your attention tonight. Our time's up.